Hello everyone and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Halleck. This week, with the Republicans' plan to overhaul Obamacare on hold, at least for the time being, President Trump is setting his sights on two new battles: getting Congress to pass his budget and tax reform. The president wants to keep his campaign promise to shrink federal government by getting rid of programs like Essential Air Service, which subsidizes airlines that provide passenger service to smaller rural communities. The federal government pays between $2 million and $3 million a year to airlines that connect airports like Plattsburgh and Saranac Lake to hubs in Boston and Albany, saving passengers like Ken White from Saranac the inconvenience of having to drive either across the lake or 150 miles to Albany.
I'd be traveling to Burlington or Albany at the very least.
Mr. Trump says eliminating the Essential Air Service program could save taxpayers $175 million a year. But both of New York's U.S. senators and Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik oppose the president's plan.
Well, we're going to have to fight against that funding cut because it will really harm this region. It'll harm our businesses, it'll harm families, it'll harm tourism, and we rely on those tourists coming in. So if you don't have air service, it impedes people who want to travel. Honestly, if you eliminate local service, it's a problem. So we're going to have to fight against that and make sure that budget cut does not stay there.
Critics say that you can drive to an airport 100 miles away. Do you think, though, that the rural airports need to be subsidized?
Rural airports are really important, and they make a huge difference. Yes, of course, you can drive an hour or 2 hours to other airports, but it's not the same. If you have regional service, you're going to get more economic growth, you're going to have more commerce in general, you're going to have more businesses locate here, and you're going to have more tourism.
And many in the community agree that having air service is not only a convenience, but a boost to the economy.
There is the economic impact of having jobs at the terminals, points of access when you're bringing folks in from the region to showcase new businesses such as Norse Titanium.
The airport is such a big factor in a lot of businesses here. I really would like to see it stay.
PenAir's Chief Operating Officer Dave Hall, who is based at the airline's headquarters in Anchorage, Alaska, says it's too early to tell if cuts to or elimination of EAS subsidies could force the airline to curtail the number of flights out of this airport or pull out of Plattsburgh altogether. But Hall says he doesn't believe it's going to come to that. He says the $175 million is, in his words, small potatoes compared to some of the other spending cuts that Trump has in the budget. And he believes that Congress is going to hear from a number of the small rural communities across the country that rely on subsidized commercial air service. We talked with Senator Gillibrand last week when she visited the Strand Center for the Arts in Plattsburgh, where she called on her fellow lawmakers to reject many of the president's other proposed budget cuts, including those which would zero out federal funding for the arts, humanities, and public media.
He plans to eliminate the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, I don't know what he has against Big Bird, and the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences. So if we get rid of these agencies, it would truly be devastating to communities like this one, because these are fundamental funding programs for arts across the nation.
The Strand Center is almost done with the $4 million restoration of the Strand Theater, which Gillibrand toured during her visit. The Strand got some federal grants for its restoration, but it now relies mostly on funding from New York State. If you'd like to learn more about the impact the cuts could potentially have on the arts and public broadcasters like Mountain Lake PBS, visit our website at mountainlake.org. You can also watch our full interview with Senator Gillibrand on the proposed budget cuts. She also talks about a recent crackdown by ICE agents on migrants and the arrest of two activists who help fellow migrants, both legal and illegal, who work on dairy farms in the region. Their arrest led to this protest in Burlington earlier this month. It appears Mr. Trump is also setting his sights on tax reform, and according to his chief of staff, that will include a border tax. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says a tax on imports would hurt the economies of both countries.
The last piece
Michael Hawes, a Canadian scholar who is a distinguished political science professor and the executive director of Fulbright Canada, told business leaders in Plattsburgh this past week that working with the new administration, especially on NAFTA and other trade issues, needs to be a top priority for Canada.
Mr. Trudeau has made, from where I sit, a significant effort to make sure that the relationship, the strength of the relationship, continues, and that there's not any sense that there's political differences or ideological differences, but rather moving ahead in a very practical way. There are a whole lot of issues, though, that we need to care about. U.S. foreign policy is broadly inconsistent with the foreign policy we're pursuing. U.S. environmental policy is broadly inconsistent with the Canadian priorities.
That was highlighted just this week when Mr. Trump signed executive orders that roll back environmental regulations on the coal industry. He's also calling for a review of President Obama's Clean Power Plan that places tighter limits on greenhouse gas emissions from power plants. And already at odds with Mr. Trudeau over climate change, President Trump is expected to nominate a prominent Republican fundraiser from Kentucky to be the next U.S. ambassador to Canada. Kelly Knight Kraft is married to billionaire Joe Kraft, who is the CEO of one of the largest coal-producing companies in the nation.